Hello and welcome to season 10 of the Meaning Movement podcast. If you're watching this, if you're hearing my voice, this is the culmination of a ton of work that my team and I have been doing over the past few months to get ready, to get prepared to 4X our production with this podcast. You may have heard me talk about before how important the Meaning Movement is to me personally and how much I've wanted to see it to go to new places and how I'm kind of just throwing everything at the wall, see what sticks, kind of blowing it up to see what's going to happen. And this episode and this season of the next couple of months of doing 2 episodes per week is a piece of that process for me. So I'm so excited to be here with you, to be doing this together. So welcome to season 10. DJ Vanas is an enrolled member of the Ottawa Tribe of Michigan, a celebrated speaker, thought leader, best-selling author, and former U.S. Air Force officer. Through his work, DJ inspires people to apply the Native American concept of the warrior spirit and related principles to serve at their best, to stay resilient, and to lead with courage. For over 2 decades of doing this work, he's delivered dynamic programs to clients such as Walt Disney, NASA, the U.S. Army, and a whole bunch of other government and tribal organizations. He's also been invited to speak at the White House twice, which is pretty amazing. In today's conversation, we just had such a good conversation. It was so much fun to connect with DJ. It's one of those conversations where I feel like it could have just gone on for hours. There's just such a good kindred spirit and synergy between his work and my work. We explore what it means to be a warrior, what it means to be a warrior in our modern lives, as well as DJ's journey through his career. And we get into his latest book, all on this topic of being a warrior, awakening the warrior spirit. The book is called The Warrior Within. It was just a great conversation. I can't wait to share it with you. So this, of course, is the Meaning Movement podcast, a show about work worth doing. I'm here to help you level up your life, your income, your career, help you find more fulfillment, more satisfaction, more sense of accomplishment and achievement and success in whatever it is that you're doing and pursuing. So if that sounds good to you, if all of that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the subscribe below. Whatever podcast catcher you're listening on, just go ahead and hit that subscribe so you can know every time a new episode drops. Right now, we're releasing 2 episodes per week and don't want you to miss those. Stay tuned today with guest DJ Vanas. Let's get to it. This episode, like all episodes of the Meaning Movement podcast, is made possible by the Calling Course. I just want to say, what do I mean by that when I say made possible? It sounds like something that they say in Sesame Street at the beginning or the end. My kids love Sesame Street. What I mean by that is this is a bootstrapped project. I have a course called the Calling Course. It's what I consider the cornerstone or flagship offering of the Meaning Movement. That course is all about work, all about purpose, all about navigating this space of these questions of who am I? What is my life about? Where am I going? What's my contribution going to be? Whether that's right now, in the future, whatever it might be. This podcast has expenses. We pay for those expenses via sales of that Calling Course, also through sponsorships. Share a little bit more about in just a moment. But I wanted to just, instead of talking about the Calling Course here today, wanted to share some words from a recent member of the course. This is Ryan. He sent this over and gave me permission to share this with you. So I'm going to read from him, his thoughts on being a part of the Calling Course. He says, discovering more of who I am and how that connects to the world in work is an overwhelming process. It can be hard to know where to start and easy to feel stuck. The Meaning Movement has been a great acceleration, affirmation, and help in this to me. The Calling Course specifically offered new perspectives and a deeper invitation into who I am and how I can walk the path to becoming my fullest self, connected to others in a mission through work. I love that so much. The combination of material, questions, and direct coaching through Q&A is powerful. I recommend it to anyone doing the hard work of walking deeper into their call. First, thank you so much, Ryan, for those words. They are just so fantastic. And I couldn't have said it better myself, which is why I'm reading them here. If you're listening or watching and you want to know more about the calling course, the course I open up for enrollment periodically. I don't have a set schedule at this time, but the best way to know when it's going to be the next enrollment period is going to be opening is for you to be on the email list. You can get on the email list anywhere at themeaningmovement.com. You'll find a bunch of subscribe boxes around the site, or go to the calling course, thecallingcourse.com. There is a free mini course. It gives just a small taste of what the calling course is all about. If you join that mini course, you'll be sure to be on the list for our next enrollment. So if any of that sounds exciting and enticing to you, make sure to jump on the email list, and then you'll be notified when that next enrollment period opens. I just want to take a quick moment to talk about sponsorship. I've always said that this podcast, this endeavor is made possible by the calling course. What that means is it's self-funded, it's bootstrapped, but we are opening the door to sponsors to come alongside us if they're a good fit for our audience. So if you have a business, a service, or work for someone who does, that would like to get in front of an audience like ours, shoot us an email at podcast@themeaningmovement.com. We can tell you more about what we have to offer by way of our audience and sponsorship opportunities, and we can take the conversation from there. Podcast@themeaningmovement.com. Thanks so much. DJ, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the Meaning Movement Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here with us.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate being here.
The question I like to begin with is, how do you begin to talk about the work that you do in the world?
Oh my gosh. Well, starting off with a big question. I've always looked at my work, and I've proudly looked at my work as providing for providers. So the majority of what I do is serving those who are in service to others, helping those people to be strong, to be resilient, to stay focused on their path, to take care of themselves as they do it so they can do it sustainably. So that's what I've always seen as my role. It's what I'm passionate about. And I am blessed to be able to do this in my career.
Yeah, I love that. Let's just maybe fill that out even just a little bit more for listeners. Like, how does that manifest? What does that look like on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis?
Yeah, well, the majority of who I work with, like I said, are people who are in service to others. And the foundation of all the work that I do, speaking, writing, delivering my programs, comes from a foundation of Native American philosophy and wisdom. I share the warrior role and what that meant traditionally. It's not the Hollywood image, that sweaty, chiseled figure, strutting down the street and shooting bazookas and bullets and knocking down buildings. And occasional, surly looks at the camera. It's an image that's based on our traditional warrior role, which was all about serving others well. My tribe, we call our warriors Ogeechee Da, and that term has nothing to do with what we see in TV or in movies. It's not about that toxic, masculinity part of that warrior role, or being dominant, or getting ahead by stepping on somebody else. It was about somebody who was willing to take their creator-given talent and ability, develop that over a lifetime so they could be an asset or a benefit to the tribe that they serve. And today, whether that tribe is our own family, our company, our team, we get to define what that is, but we all have one to serve. And so that warrior role was, somebody who's willing to fight for something bigger than themselves, somebody who led by example, somebody who asked a question, not what can I get, but what can I do for somebody else, and who ultimately was dedicated to serving others through thick and thin, day in and day out. So.
Yeah, this is what I was like, one of the first questions, I was like, what do I want to talk? What do I want to ask as DJ? But it's like about that question, warrior, because I have a strong reaction to that, because I'm not a, kind of an in your face kind of guy. I don't, I'm not high testosterone. Let's get out there and let's that's not me at all. Yeah. So when I first picked up your book, and so DJ has a book that's coming out probably around the time this episode will go live. What is the release date so listeners know?
It's August 2nd this summer, coming up right around the corner. Getting excited.
Awesome. Yeah. It's called The Warrior Within: Own Your Power to Serve, Fight, Protect, and Heal. We'll circle back to your story and everything, but since we're on the topic of the warrior, I just want to jump in here. Before I picked up the book, that's the misconception that I had.
Yes.
I was like, okay, this book isn't going to be for me.
It's a loaded word, right?
Yeah.
Everybody comes into it with preconceived notions on what that role actually means. And unfortunately, a lot of times it gets relegated to more of that Hollywood, the stereotypical image that we see. And so people immediately don't identify with that. They're like, well, that's not
Yeah.
me. I like to take care of people. I'm caring. I'm a good listener. And that's why I come to it from a traditional tribal standpoint. It wasn't about being dominant. It was about somebody who was willing to serve. I
Yeah.
mean, that was the heart of the warrior role. And it transcends race. It transcends gender. It transcends age. And these principles is what I share in the book on how to
Yeah.
walk this path well. But the principles are relevant and applicable no matter where you're coming to it from, but they help
Yeah.
us deliver great service even in the midst of chaos, which we've all been through for the last 2 years.
Yes, and we'll continue to go through
Right. Yeah.
indefinitely. And then also
Yes.
just for listeners, like a warrior isn't, I think often we use that word, we think masculine, but that's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely not true. And I address that in the beginning of the book.
Yep.
Like I said, there's a lot of misnomers that go along with that
Mhm.
word. And what I'm trying to do is cut to the heart of how we can all, be on that path and serve other people well. And the way that we do that is by removing some of the obstacles
I
to
love it.
actually following that, benevolent path of strong, sustainable service to other
Yes.
people, to have an impact in the world that's positive. That's really what it comes down to in the end.
Yeah. And that's exactly what this show is all about, is having an impact, doing work that matters, that intersection between doing work that, that pays the bills and also that does more than just pays the bills. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, why I was so excited to have this conversation with you. I'd love to just rewind a little bit and just ask the question of, how do you find yourself here? Like, what's the story that's led you into this work as being the focus of your life right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's been a crazy road to get here, as it is for most people who show up in a place where they're really excited about what they do and they're like, how did this happen? Because I
Yes.
still have pinch me moments, that it led to all this. And how it all started, when I was growing up, one of the things I wanted to do more than anything was become a fighter pilot. My dad was in the military for 21 years. I grew up at the end of a runway on a military base. So I was always fascinated with that. I became a licensed pilot in high school. I dedicated myself, everything went into getting into the Air Force Academy. That was my goal. And I got in. And then the second week I was there, they said, you're never going to fly. And I was devastated. I mean, I spent like 4 years of my life working my guts out, paying for my pilot's license, making sure my grades were high. And so you have moments like that in life, and I didn't have a backup plan. I'm sitting in the stairwell, crying my eyes out with a shaved head, second week of basic training for a 4-year stay at the Air Force Academy.
Oh, geez.
And I was just floored. And after, I sat out there and cried for a while and wiped the tears out of my eyes. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And this is where you take those, that gut check assessment in your life when things go horribly wrong, or at least you feel like they did in that moment. And so I said, well, let's take an assessment. Where am I? I'm at one of the best schools in the nation, and I'm on a full scholarship. Everybody that gets into military academies, everything is covered. And I'm already making great friends, and I'm bald. And I it's like, and I don't look good with a shaved head. I look like a squirrel monkey. Some guys who can rock that look is great. I'm not one of them. So I said, well, I at least have to wait till my hair grows out. I'm not going to go home like this. So anyways, 4 years later, I'm throwing my hat up in the air and the Thunderbirds are flying over, and I got commissioned as an officer. But what led me to this is I stayed back at the academy for a year, and I actually recruited. Because one of the things that came up for me that was a source of frustration is, we had a federally funded institution of 4,400 people, and there were only, I think, at the time, 8 of us who were tribally enrolled. And I wanted to change that. I said, this needs to change. And so I ended up working for them for a year, and I went out to Native communities from coast to coast. They worked me like a dog that year, and I loved it. And I found that going out and sharing, the importance of education, I was sharing what it took to get into the Air Force Academy or become an officer in the Air Force, which I was also passionate about. But I was starting to talk about education, milestones, and turning points of my life, all related to what I was, sharing out in the sessions. But they started to take on more of a personal angle. And I found that I loved doing that. And I never had an opportunity. And so it led me to, I stayed with it, doing it on the side for several years. And then I had an opportunity to start doing it professionally. I mean, we could talk about how that happened. That was a magical moment too. But that's what led me to where I am now. And I left the military in 2002 as a captain to do this full time. And I never looked back.
Wow. So how long were you in service?
Almost 10 years active duty.
Wow.
So 4 years at the academy, almost 10 years active duty. But I thoroughly enjoyed the time in service. I'm proud that, I was able to serve my country. It's a family tradition. It's also a tribal tradition. We have the highest rates of service, Native Americans in this country, than any other ethnic group in America. And we have for over 100 years. And so it was an honor to do that. But I only left because I love what I'm doing more. And that was the only reason why I left. but I had a great experience in the military.
Yeah, yeah. What do you feel like accounts for, just anecdotally, for just that high rate of enrollment for First Nation, Native American cultures, folks?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is it's the warrior tradition. The warrior philosophy is alive and well in our tribal communities. It was one of the ways that we could express that by being a member of the military. There's also other reasons too, economic reasons. I mean, my dad joined the Air
Totally.
Force right out of high school because my parents had me when they were teenagers. And so he was going to have to provide for his family. So there's a driver there, but that's the
Yep.
same for a lot of different, especially minority communities. What sets
Yep.
us apart as a tribal community, why our rates are so high, is because of that warrior tradition in
Yeah.
action. I was part of a PBS documentary called The Warrior Tradition that unpacks this, which is a great, I was
Yeah.
honored to be a part of that, but it
Cool.
explains, kind of our philosophies, why we have
Yeah.
such high service rates, and why it's in great alignment with, kind of what we've always looked at as important.
Yeah, I love that. Well, tell me a little bit about that transition out of the military, and I guess going from that to where you are now. Like, you're very
Yeah,
much like making your own path, right? And we're always
yeah,
making our own path, but it's
always.
nice to feel like someone else is helping along the way, or that at
Yeah,
least there's a template that we're following. And
right.
the military does provide that, I think, for a lot of folks. Like, here's a career path, here's choices, here's opportunity.
Yeah.
And so then you're leaving that structure
Oh my
to go
God, it
out
was
on your own.
terrifying.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Terrifying. Oh my God. Yeah, talk about jumping out of the safe zone into
Yeah,
this
like the
blue
most
sky.
structured
Oh
the
my
most
gosh.
structured
Yeah,
life you
yeah,
could live as the most
yeah.
structured organization in the world, right?
Exactly, exactly. And things were going great. I was connected to the people I was serving with. So what gave me kind of the courage to do that is I felt so strong about what I wanted to do that even the safety of that wasn't enough to keep me there. And like I said,
Mhm.
I loved what I was doing in the military. It was going well, but this called to me at a gut level that I just felt like this is what I was put here to do. In the way
Mm,
that started, it was kind of like a lightning bolt to the head. I had been speaking on the side. Like I said, I already had my military career. I was working in the space warfare arena. We were building and launching satellites as part of our defense support program.
yeah,
And so I was already engaged with that, but I was getting calls to go speak at Native education conferences, Native community events. And so I just went wherever I was called and did it, pro bono. I was burning up my leave time and I just knew that I enjoyed it and I was passionate about it. And one weekend I went out to dinner with a group of friends of mine. I was stationed in LA and one of the guys was talking about his dad came into town. I said, "What does your dad do?" And he said, "He's a professional speaker." And this guy I'm talking about, his name was Brent Henry, was my buddy, and his father was one of the founding members of the National Speakers Association.
oh,
And
wow.
so he started talking to me, and Dan, I'm telling you, it's like everything melted away. I couldn't hear or
Wow.
see anything except this conversation. And he said, "Yeah," he goes, "and next month, the national conference is happening, and this year it's happening here." He goes, "You
Wow.
gotta go." And it changed everything for me. So I'm at this
Wow.
conference. Mr. Henry is shoving me in front of people like Casey Kasem, Lou Holtz, Les Brown. They're like, "Here's the next guy," and it just blew my mind that this was even a path of, a possible
Yeah.
path. And so it
Yeah.
inspired me. It got me excited. And I started kind of plotting my journey forward to
Mm.
eventually be able to do it full time.
Mm.
So it
What
was
a amazing. I mean, I like have goosebumps, like just the way you describe that, and just like
every time I
I
tell
feel
that
like I've
story, I
had
get
that moment.
goosebumps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like the
And
clouds parted. Yeah.
yes, yes. And I don't know, like, I think we all want to have that like mountaintop experience, where the
Yeah.
clouds part and the universe tells you why you were born. And
Yeah.
very few people have that, at least not in those ways. But I think that there are these smaller ways where it does show up, like you're describing, if you're paying attention to it.
And here's the thing is, I think it does show up a lot more than we give it credit for. We
Yeah.
just don't listen. Or
Mm,
we listen and we hear it and we go, "Oh," we feel it at a gut and head level. And then we go,
yep.
"Ooh, but that's going to be really scary. That's going to
Yes.
be really hard.
Ugh.
I don't know how to do this. I don't have
Yeah.
support. Nobody in my family's ever done this. Nobody in my
Mm,
community. I don't know anybody who's done this." So it's not just hearing the call, it's answering the
yeah.
call. And
Yes.
because flash forward now, I had set everything up to move forward and I'm getting ready to leave the military.
Yeah.
Halfway into a 20-year career where if I go 20 years, I retire, I get pension for life. Halfway
Yes.
through, and I'm ready to hit the ejection button. Everybody thought I was nuts.
Yeah.
And, even my commander sat me down and go, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" Because this was just not a move that most people did.
Mm,
And so that was where it really became a gut check. It was like
Yeah.
night sweats. Like the 2 weeks before I turned in my final paperwork, I questioned everything. And I was
Yeah.
this close to not doing it.
Yeah.
And so just that little edge kept pulling me forward. And,
Mm.
one of the things I go back to is a quote during that time. And hopefully this will inspire people who are listening to this. When that fear comes in, and it will, when the doubt starts to build up, and it will, there was a quote that really helped me. And it said, leap and the net will appear. And I
Yes.
don't know who originally said that, but I will
Yeah.
tell you, it is absolutely true. And then another quote like that is jump and grow your wings on the way down.
Yes.
And I think both have a lot of truth and impact because,
Mm.
man, I did that then and I've been doing it ever since. And it works like a charm.
Oh,
It's
man.
not always pretty, but it does work.
Yo, I know. Yeah. I mean, like so much of this, like, I feel like this conversation for me personally, I feel like this podcast often becomes a biopic for me, but like it just is hitting me so strongly because I'm at this point where I had the podcast and the meaning movement for a long time. And I really believe that it is a part of my gift to the world. And I'm
Yeah.
at this place where it's like I'm making some strategic choices to put some more resources, more time into it. But I have this history of with it where it hasn't added up to an income that I've wanted it to be. And so it's been
Yeah.
like, I'm like at this point where it's like, okay, this has to go one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I feel like right now, this conversation, I think is, just hearing you even say that, like, just take that leap. And I feel like I'm very much in that moment right now. So thank you for that
Oh, you got it,
example.
Dan. The deciding moment is making a critical decision to be all in. And when
Yes.
you're
Ah,
all in, that means you're taking your foot off of first base and you're going to second. You
yeah.
can't do both. And I tried to do both and I about broke myself in half because
Yeah.
when I was getting ready to leave the military, I was doing two basically full-time jobs. I mean, I was speaking
Yep.
on the side, burning up all my leave time. I had 10 people in my full-time team and advising 100 out in the field. We had just
Yeah.
started a family. It was just intensely busy and chaotic. And I was trying to do two things at once and I ended up getting the shingles.
Oh,
And I just, you have to get to a point where like, which direction are you going to go?
yeah.
And the scary part is the fear was exacerbated because I was getting halfway results because I was
Mhm.
doing it halfway. And I kept thinking
Yes.
that's as good as I can go. It's like,
Yes. Oh,
but once
man.
I cut that tie and I said, I'm in and I turned in the paperwork, everything got routed into making this a success. And
Wow.
so all my time and energy, and I think one of the keys is not just learning what to say yes to, it's learning what to say no to. That
Yep.
gives us clarity and it
Mhm.
concentrates our power into something that gets a result. We
Yeah.
can't do everything,
Ugh,
you know?
man, you're like totally describing me right now. It's like really, yeah, emotional. I'm having a lot of feelings. And so, yeah,
It's the world we live
yeah,
in. We are in such a high stimulus environment and we
yes,
think we're missing out if we're doing this and we're missing out.
yep,
At some point,
yep,
we just got to say, this is what I want. I'm going to put everything
yep.
I've got into it.
Mm,
It's like being out in the sun for 5 minutes. Nothing dramatic is going to happen to you. If you
yeah,
focus that energy that's falling on your face into a magnifying glass, any
yeah,
10-year-old kid will tell you what you can do with that. You can
yeah. You
make
can burn
fire.
up ants.
Yeah. You can light your backyard on fire. And I did it. And I did that as a 10-year-old kid.
Yes, me
So
too.
but it's all about the
Mm,
power of focus, and that
oh,
necessarily means what we're saying no to.
yeah, man. This is such a well-timed conversation for me, and thank you for that challenge that you probably didn't know that you were going to be
Yeah.
offering to someone, 10 years behind you and on the journey. But yeah, after you made that choice, you turned in your notice, you're done
Hmm.
with the military. Did you have that any moments when you're like, good Lord, what have I done? Like,
Hell yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember this really well. The first quarter of the first full year I was doing this. And, when you leave the military halfway through, you get no benefits. You get a handshake and a thank you for your service, and you're out the door.
Wow.
So no benefits. This was what we were living off was the income I was earning from speaking. Well, I didn't do
Yeah.
good tax planning. In the first quarter, I had a huge tax payment due.
Oh shoot.
And halfway through the month, I remember this, it was almost like a meant to be thing. We had $123 in the business checking account. And at that point, all the doubt, all the fear cascaded on top of me. And I questioned
Yeah.
everything. And I was like, what have I done?
Yes.
This isn't going to work. It was a rough 24 hours. I mean, you question
Yeah.
everything. It was like a day later, I get a call from Hewlett Packard. Love you, HP, because they said, we've got 3 programs scheduled with you later this year. And I said, And I knew why they were calling. They were going to cancel.
Oh
That
no.
was my doubtful mind in that moment. And I said,
Yes.
And they said, we wanted to know if we could pay you for all 3 of those now. And I went, give me a minute. Let me find out. I was like, And I said, yeah, I think that'll work. And
That'll work.
Dan, they FedExed the entire amount, and I got it a day
Oh,
later, or day or two later. And what it
incredible.
made it for me is I will never put myself in that position again. So from then on, I ran the business like a business. I stayed
Yeah.
5 steps ahead of the game.
Mm,
I did, vigilant planning, due diligence with, how I structured everything, and always
yeah.
stayed, a couple months out to
Yeah.
make sure that we didn't get into that position again. But yeah, there's been a lot of
Wow.
those, it's
Yeah.
never a smooth
Yeah.
road, but
No, never. So how long ago was that?
oh, that was probably in 2003, 2000.
Okay.
Yeah, the first full year I was doing it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
whew,
Incredible. Really
yeah.
incredible. Yeah. Well, you're speaking my language and delivering a message that I'm receiving. And I think that this is an important I feel like my work is done. This is what you just shared is why we're having this conversation. But
Right
I
on.
love, what you're doing. Love the book. I've not read all of it, but plan to. I think, for me as a Native American, like one of the things that you're doing here, I think is like giving me an access point to like this wisdom. I'm sure there are other access points. I just really appreciated that, like to be able to learn from a culture and a history. And I know that like you're of course not speaking on behalf of your entire tradition, but in your
Yeah,
corner of that tradition, I would just really go, I don't know, it felt like words that I needed to be reading. And
I
so it was
appreciate
really,
that.
yeah, a fun entry point, I guess.
And I appreciate you saying that. And I will say too, and I'll reemphasize, I am not a spokesperson for my tribe. I don't speak for all of Indian country.
Yep.
I share
Yep.
in the book ideas from my heart that are principles that made our warriors special. Principles that we
Yes.
can apply in context in our lives today, like I said, regardless of background, race, age. But the other thing too is I was very fortunate to have a lot of elders in my life, including during traditional ceremony, that had a philosophy that if there is a good idea that we have that can impact our lives, that we are not only allowed to share, but we're obligated to share that with the world around
Mm.
us. And that's why I'm so passionate about these principles is, here's a great idea we have in our culture. Now hide it. Now don't share
Yes.
it with anybody. Like,
Yes.
there's sometimes a mentality around that, but I was
Mm.
taught differently. It's like, if this works and it works for you and it comes from our culture, these are beautiful things in our culture. These are special things and they're meant to impact the world around us. They're not meant to be held in the corner and hidden away from view.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Where did this book start for you? When did it become a book in your mind? And then I think the next step I want to know, what is your hope for the impact that it will have on folks?
Oh my gosh, great questions. Number one, I think I've been writing this book my whole life. This is
Yeah.
my third book, but I think that this is the book I've been writing my whole life. It goes back even to childhood. That's why I'm so excited to share this. I'm really happy and proud of how it turned out. I am excited for readers to open it up and see what's in there. But I hope what readers get out of it is when they are done with the book, that they feel more confident about their own talent and ability, that they have a better strategy on how to bring that out on a daily basis, that they
Mhm.
know how to keep themselves strong. They know that service is the most important thing we ever do as human beings on this planet. And that if you're in that role, you are already blessed.
Mm.
So learning how to do it better is what the book is all
Yeah.
about, and how to
Yeah.
stay in that zone without falling
Yep.
apart. One of the things I say in the
Yep.
book, you can't be a warrior if you're falling apart. It just
Yes.
doesn't work.
Yes.
Intentions be damned. It's like, it's all about
Yes.
execution. But I want people to feel at the end of the book that they realize they're stronger than they know. They've got
Mhm.
capabilities that they're not tapping and that they could.
Mhm.
And it's an invitation to become a better version of ourselves. So it's not an edict, it's not a force or a browbeating
Mhm.
session. It's a, here's some great ideas to help you get to an even higher level in what you do as a human being on this journey.
I love it. Do you think of it as a framework, like the warrior within? How do you think of, I guess, the structure of the content? I mean, I know it's the different attributes of being a warrior. I guess, what are the pieces that you feel like are the most overlooked or most surprising when people encounter them for the first time?
Yeah, and it definitely is a framework. I mean, I kind of
Yeah.
created the book to be a ladder to climb,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
That's
right
what I
at the
felt.
beginning
Yeah.
steps, I think one of the things that I think gets overlooked, well, I'll cover two in particular, because we always talk about how to be resilient, how to be strong, how to have a vision of where we're going. All those things are critically important in a chaotic world. But I think
Mhm.
two of the chapters that even my publisher were kind of like, oh, this is kind of a unique view on this, was number one, chapter two is learning to live off the land, or living off the
Yeah.
land, which is using our resources in our own backyard. And oh my gosh, this gets so overlooked on a daily basis. We should never ever feel stuck, that we don't have answers, that we can't figure it out. We have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to access to information in the world that we live in
Mhm.
today. And
Mhm.
it's a matter of leveraging what we have in us and around us to create what we want to see. And I've worked with over 500 tribal nations in the last 30 years of my life, including my own. Everywhere I've gone, those tribes use what was in their own backyard to create what they wanted to see. So the Inuit in Alaska use sealskin for clothing, for
Mm.
shelters, which is as warm as cloth, 4 times the thickness, and it's waterproof. The Pueblo in New Mexico live in an area that's hot in the summer, cold in the winter. They use the mud in their backyard, literally, to create adobe and make these beautifully structured multi-level apartment complexes that are cool in the summer, warm in the winter. My tribe, we use birch bark for our canoes. We tapped the trees in our backyard and made maple syrup. You're welcome. That was one of our contributions to the world at large. I'm very proud of
Love it.
that because I love
Love
maple
it.
syrup. I could drink it by the bottle.
Me too.
But it's those things that we have in our own backyards, our time, our energy, technology, other people, our
Yep.
own skill sets. I mean, we
Yep.
completely sometimes overlook these things and then stand around with our hands out and go, I don't know what to do. I've got nothing to work with here. We got to get out of that mentality. There is always resources that we can use to leverage in any given moment we're in. So that's one of them. And then the
I
last
love that.
chapter is about becoming an elder. That's one of the things I
Mm.
don't think we focus on enough. That's one of
Yeah.
the things I'm very proud of in our tribal
Yeah.
traditions is our elders, their whole goal was to collect as much good stuff as they could, not so they could hoard it or use it as a weapon or, show off. It was so
Yeah.
that they could empower their people so everybody
Yeah.
benefited. And that's a powerful role that's still alive and well in our tribal communities. Our elders pass down our, wisdom, information, culture, language, concepts. And
Mm.
we can do that in our work too when we actively mentor other people behind us. It gives us a lot
Yeah.
of joy for our work. And no matter what we do for a living, we're not going to be doing it forever. And I think the highest hope we have is we're given the baton, putting it into better hands than our own. And that only happens by design.
I love that. Both those are so good. I think on the mentorship piece, recently I had an interview with Adam Anderson. I'll link to in the show notes, who he was talking about this idea of mentorship and how we usually think of mentorship as being mentees, being mentored by someone else, and how
Right.
important that is. And he was talking about just how, in his experience, it's just as important, even for the mentor to be going back and delivering, like helping, guiding, giving that guidance, that it reminds you of where you've been, where you've come from, and you
Yeah.
grow through that process.
You do. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a really cool reframing. I love that Native American traditions, honor elders so
Hmm.
much more so than I think Western culture allows, right? I
Yeah.
feel like it's the missed opportunity for that wisdom to be passed down. And so I love that you're inviting people to step into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting older in our society is a detriment. It's looked down upon as somebody
Yeah.
who is now not functional because we're looking at it through that lens of the physicality. Like in
Yeah.
our tribal communities, as we get older, we're becoming more and more concentrated with wisdom, with experience
Yeah.
that we can
Yeah.
share. So those elders get, the more priceless they become. And so it leaves a real gap in our tribal communities when we lose an elder because they take with them all that wisdom that, wasn't shared. That's why it's so important to get it out there.
Yes. Oh, that's so
We
well
can't take
said.
it with us. So
Yeah.
it's better to
Mm.
share it.
Yeah. Well, just to even circle back to what you're saying, just about using the resources at our fingertips in our own backyard. So I know a lot of people listening are at places where they're looking to make some sort of change, and maybe they know what it is, maybe they don't, but they might feel stuck in some way. And I'm curious if you have any specific words of wisdom, encouragement, challenge that you want to
Yeah.
offer to people who feel like they might be in one of those stuck places where they don't know what resources to leverage.
Yeah, great question. Something we all deal with. And the advice I would have is simply it is infinitely more important to know what you want to do than how you will get there.
Oh, that is
Because
so
if you
good.
know what you want to do and you've got a target, you will figure out in time how to get there. That's where you start gathering resources, asking questions, kicking rocks over, just starting to
Yeah.
innovate and creatively use the resources that you have access to. But it's
Yep.
critically important to know what that target looks like for you.
Mm.
You'll figure it
Mm.
out as you go. But that's
Yeah.
the thing is people want to have it figured out before they identify
Yes.
the target. That's not the way it
Yes.
works. And that's why some
Yes.
people get frustrated for weeks, months, and years in their life and career because they want this clear-cut path all the way to the goal. It
Yeah.
never works like that.
No.
So
Yeah. I was just gonna say, even if it did, it wouldn't be a good story, right? Like it
yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah.
You'd already be there. You'd already be there to begin with. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, life is an adventure. So is our
Yeah.
career. And the way that we build it, it's going to have its ups and downs and
Yeah.
those moments of fear, that we all encounter. But, like I said, when we know where we're headed, we have clarity. And when we have clarity, we have power. Now
Mm.
we know what to say yes to, what to say no to. We know what resources to access, who we maybe want to get help from. It's like, hey,
Yep.
I want to do a podcast, who I want to talk to. Let me talk to Dan. He knows how to do this. Like, we
Yeah.
don't have to figure it out on our own, but the
Totally.
key is we need to know what our target is for this
Mm,
reason and for this reason,
I love that. Yeah. And in the book, you talk about fear. I think you even have
hmm
if I remember right, a whole chapter, at least a section dedicated to it. I know that that's
Yes.
a big piece of like where people get stuck. And I know in my own life, I feel like I've always had this long fascination. I had this thing called Fearless February, which was a challenge to set aside the month of February to choose a fear to act on and take action against, right?
Yeah.
To become not fearless, but to take action in the face of fear. And I just wanted
Yes.
to hear, and I guess, and open up that door for you there of, to share about a warrior's approach to
Yeah.
fear. What is that relationship, and how can people have a healthy relationship with their fear?
I love it. Yeah, that's the way that chapter opens up. It's counting coup on our fear with
Yeah.
courage. And I share in the book about one of the tradition of the Plains tribes where they would face an enemy in live combat and they wouldn't strike the enemy down. They would simply go up and touch the enemy. And the reason why that was so much more of an honor, it was called counting coup, is because of what it required, which was courage
Yeah.
to stand toe to toe with an enemy and say, I am not afraid of you. I'm so not afraid of you. I'm not even going to strike you down or harm you. I'm just going to touch you and
That's
that's it.
wild.
Yeah, it is. And it was the ultimate, show of courage. And the reason why I bring that up in the book is because we have to be able to face the things that scare us. We can try to outrun it, out hustle it, but at the end, it's a lot more effective to simply face what we're dealing with to be able to move through it. And there
Yeah.
are so many moments. I'll give you an example. Over the last couple of years, how many fears did we have to face? How many moments did we have to step up and be courageous in that moment? And we so often don't count it as that. And that's a shame. It's a tragedy
Yeah.
because we are totally blowing through a moment of bravery and we're just looking forward. We don't reflect on the fact on what it took in that moment to get us here. And
Mm,
so the reason why I bring that up in the book is because we can build a reservoir of courage. And the way that we do that is we remind ourselves of all those moments where we had to exercise it, where we had to
yeah.
face our fears head on, where we had to step through and get to the other side. And we can actually recall those so that the next moment we face something like that, we can say, you know what? I've been here before. I know what this
Yes.
feels like. I've done this before. I can do this again. And I've
Mm,
got proof. It's
yes.
like
That's
that
so
is
good.
so important because we just will blow through those moments and go, God, I'm glad I got through that. And then we just stumble and fall into the next one and the next one. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be that way. We can take a
Yeah.
moment to pause and reflect and say, you know what? I can face this fear because I've done it
Mm.
1,000 times.
Yes, and with each one of those reps, you're becoming a different person too, right? That, like,
Yes,
even if it didn't go well the last time, like, you're a different person now as you're facing that fear, which is
absolutely.
just that importance of reminding yourself of the story that
Acknowledge
you've
it
been living.
as what it is. It was courage
Yeah,
in action.
yeah, yeah,
Don't discount that. Don't diminish it.
yeah. Yeah, I'm curious, are there any ways that you recommend people really rituals or even activities? Like, how do you remind yourself of those successes, those courageous moments?
I am a big believer in taking the first 10 minutes of each day and just being
Yeah,
in total quiet. Whether you meditate, breathe, just have a moment of silence, whatever it is for those 10
yeah,
minutes. And at the end of that 10 minutes, I focus on what I want to get done that day, who I want to be that day, remind myself that I can deal with whatever comes my way. And we never know what that's going to look like, but just have faith in yourself because, we're here. Look at all the stuff
yeah.
we've been through. We're still here. So we're
Yes.
obviously doing it, great on some level, but just to take that time to let the dirt settle in the mud puddle before we
Mm,
start stirring it up again. You get clarity on your day, you get clarity on yourself and what you're bringing to the table, what your contribution can be. And, it's a better place to operate from. You're coming from a place of
yeah,
strength instead of a place of
yeah.
chaos.
Yeah, it sounds like a very centered approach, which is really,
And I
yeah,
do that as
really,
a ritual.
I love that. I'm curious just to zoom out a little bit on your work. And I know you've already kind of spoken to this, but let's
Mhm.
just, kind of try to distill it down even further. If we were to, put a billboard on the moon, if you will, and you could put any
Okay.
message on that billboard, what would you put? And what I mean by that is a message that the whole world could see. We don't literally need a billboard on the moon, but what would be that message?
Oh my gosh. It's a great question, but it's a tough one. I would put on that billboard anything is possible. You are stronger and more beautiful than you know.
Oh, that is so good.
I
That's
mean, that
so
just
good.
popped into my mind thinking about that. If I could see
Yeah.
something on the moon that I would want to look at every day that I think might lift people up and get them to believe in their own gifts, that's what I would
Yeah,
put.
I love it. That's fantastic. I think, that's such a positive and beautiful message to wrap up with. I think that's a good place for us to kind of move towards wrapping up. This has been so fun. I feel like I could, like I've already said multiple times, this is the conversation I needed today. So thank you for that gift to me. And I know that it also, will be a gift to our listeners as well. So
Thank you, Dan.
really appreciate it. And for folks that want to connect with you or follow along with your work, is there anything specific you'd like to invite people to?
Yes, absolutely. Best way to get in touch with me or to find out more about my work is our website, which is nativediscovery.com. And then I would highly encourage people to go out and get a copy of their book, The Warrior Within, which will be released on August 2nd. And you can buy it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, directly from the publisher, Penguin Random House. But the audio version will be released on that date as well. I'm going into the studio later this week to record it. So it'll be coming out simultaneously as a hardcover ebook and audiobook all on August 2nd. So please go out and get a copy or many copies to share with people around you.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure to link up to your site and the book in our show notes as well. Thank you so much, DJ. This has been so fun. Really love having you on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I'll say Chimigwet Sniji. Thank you very much, my friend, for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything here today, DJ, and thank you listeners and viewers for tuning in. You can find links to DJ's work at themeaningmovement.com/DJ, just the letter D and the letter J. If you're unaware, we are on YouTube now, as well as all the podcast catchers around the internet. You can find that at youtube.com/themeaningmovement. Wherever you're watching or listening, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified of upcoming episodes. And if there's a place to give a thumbs up or rating or review, please take a moment to do that on YouTube, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else where that's available. That's how people like you find this show, and it means the world to me. Additionally, we're putting out content every week via our newsletter. Content about these episodes, about our guests, with giveaways. We're doing trainings, and we have this great section at the end where I just give a roundup of some of my favorite things that I've been enjoying from products, media, all kinds of stuff. It's just a little bit of fun and a little bit of focus on meaning, on purpose, on fulfillment, on satisfaction, and on success for you to get you through your week. You can get on that email list anywhere at themeaningmovement.com. You'll find subscribe boxes, so jump on that list. Totally free. You can unsubscribe at any time. I won't be offended. Won't hurt my feelings. But I would love to have you on that list. Our music is by Tom Roram. Our artwork is by Eleazar Ruiz. We'll be back with you in just a couple days. Take care until then.